Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We have such an exciting discussion planned for you all today that's going to highlight some of our recent research from CMP research and some CX leadership results from our recent survey and executive priorities. A ton of stuff to share, and Dave and Matt will also be providing their own expert opinions about when you should and should not be using AI, and really just what's next for CX innovation in 2026. So we have so much to talk about, so much to dive in here. But before we get started, I would love to introduce today's panel. First up, we have Dave Michaels from Talking Points. He has a ton of knowledge and experience in the communications and contact center space. Dave, would you mind just sharing a brief introduction of yourself and your current role?
Hi, I'm Dave Michaels. I am a industry analyst covering unified communications and contact center communications. I write and share my opinions regularly, but it's first time with you, Brooke. So this is going to be great.
Yeah, so excited to have you. Next, I also wanted to introduce Matt Clare. He's going to be supporting the CCAS vendor point of view in our discussion today. So, Matt, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of an introduction on yourself and your role at UJET.
Yeah, perfect. So my name's Matt Clare. I'm currently VP of Product Marketing at UJET. I've basically spent my entire career in this space with companies like Google, Mitel, and Prairie Fire. Longtime connection of Dave and Brooke and CCW. So
I've worked with
really,
you, Matt, at all those companies you just mentioned.
you
So
did,
yes.
you did, and really looking forward to today's conversation with you both.
Definitely. Okay, so with that out of the way, I would love to start our discussion because we have a ton of things to talk about today. I wanted to share, to get started here, a few points from our executive priorities that we outlined for 2025 and 2026. So, the two top priorities for CX executives right now are automating more processes and contacts and increasing customer adoption of self-service. So, question for both of you. When you think about AI agents and automation in the contact center in CX, where do you see the most value? Because that's, of course, what customers are looking for right now.
I'll jump in on this one. I think it's tricky because you're talking about two different things there. AI agents and automation they go hand in hand, but they're very separate things. There's a lot of automation going on, a lot of interest in automation. We are automating things that we never envisioned could be automated. I mean, so many parts of the contact center are being re-examined for opportunities in automation, and it's a kind of a mental shift of what's happened because we've always tried to keep the customers protected, only give them so many things they can do so they can't get in much trouble. And now there's kind of this mind shift to no, let's give them more capabilities, let's give them a lot more opportunities to take care of their own needs. But in terms of automation, I think of things like uh, quality metrics. You know, the tradition in contact center for the past, I don't know, 50 years, as you collect a sample of interactions and you do an analysis to represent the whole group. For the first time in history, we're able to monitor 100% of the interactions. So we're just kind of completely changing the way we do things in the contact center. And these are various forms of automation. So as far as AI agents go, that's a bit more complex. AI agents get confusing because of the word we use, agent, because of the word agent. In contact center parlance, we think of agents as the humans. In AI parlance, we think of agents as just automated bots that could be anything. And so when we talk about AI agents in the contact center, it's like, "Whoa, what are we talking about here?" But basically, we're looking at using AI agents to help either customers or human agents get things done in some sort of automatic way. Now, this is cutting edge stuff, and it's changing very quickly, and a lot by trial and error. A lot of this stuff is not out of the box. It is AI agents are inherently personalized, and that requires a little bit of training and whatnot. One example I always give is the airlines like to say, you know, what's your preference, aisle or window? And it's like, that's not an easy thing to answer, right? It depends. I'm going to be sleeping. Is it a long flight? Is it a short flight? All kinds of stuff go into that, and it's not so easy. And if you try to personalize an agent to make decisions for you, it's more complex than aisle or window. So it takes a little bit of time to get this stuff to work right.
Yeah, I mean it's totally true. And I think that it's it's interesting because customers want so many different things right now, and organizations of course want to meet customer needs. And so we're going to dive into this a little bit more today, but understanding when automation is helpful, when it's hurtful, and when we should be prioritizing automation is so important as we look ahead and look to integrate new technology and really build a roadmap for the future in the next few years. So, something that we always need to keep top of mind and ensure that we are understanding when it's going to add value and when it's not. Okay, so that brings me really well to my next conversation, which is this idea of the human and the AI agent. Dave, you talked a little bit about what AI agents are because they can be confusing. But we're navigating this balance right now between the human and the technology, and it's important to understand when it's going to add value, like I just said. So, what types of conversations, Matt, do you think are still best suited for humans versus AI agents?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's one that everybody's struggling to figure out right now. We've heard a lot from, without naming names, several leaders of large SaaS and AI companies recently that they're laying off all their customer support reps and basically automating everywhere with self-service. I think, well, first, that's the sort of statement you would expect a leader of an AI company to make. Second, I think it's way too soon to understand the actual impact on the end customer and their experience, their tolerance for actually that level of automation where you have a vendor who's pushing you in the direction of self-service, and getting that high touch, empathetic customer support is really difficult thing to do. So I think it really starts with understanding your customers, their preferences. I think in general, what we've seen, the digital native buyers of today who were born when the internet was around and they've basically come up with the technology, much higher appetite for actually living in self-service and being contained by an AI agent, if you will, as opposed to folks on the other end of the spectrum who still, when those challenging conversations arise, they want to get to a human as quickly as possible. And I think almost every customer that we talked to over the last couple of years has said, they still see a lot of customers of theirs who start a self-service conversation, and the first thing they say is, I want to talk to an agent. So really understanding profiling your customer is super important in understanding kind of what that balance between human and AI agent self-service looks like. Outside of that, I think AI's come so far, to Dave's point earlier, in the last couple of years with generative and large language models, etc., where the quality of the self-service experience really has improved. So you are seeing more and more conversations pivot to leveraging AI agents. But in general, it still comes down to, if you want speed, routine, kind of that mundane, repetitive task, self-service with AI agents is obviously a great thing. The key thing to keep in mind as an organization is adopting AI, of course, is like, what conversations actually require human empathy. So as a consumer myself, I can tell you right now, I had a recent exchange with my telco in Canada, and I was shutting down service. 20 years, I don't need a landline anymore at home. It makes no sense. And rather than them pivoting me to a human to try to cross-sell, upsell me, and retain me as a customer, it went to an AI agent. I can tell you that conversation ended very, very quickly. So I think in cases where, the customer is really frustrated, or it's a very sensitive conversation, like think healthcare use cases, for example, or banking use cases where there's very high stakes, like life and health or money on the line, or in those situations where it's cross-sell, upsell, we really still see a lot of organizations leaning on human-led conversations there.
I would add a little bit, you're asking about what kind of use cases. The standard answer today is predictable or repeatable processes. And so, you know, my balance or whatever, whatever, something simple, easy to understand. Those are the ones we want to automate off the bat, right? I think where the tech is going is that because the tech is getting so much better, so much more quickly, that it's going to get a little more complicated, more complex interactions. And I think it's actually going to get to the point where not only because right now when you call and you get a bot or an IVR, like Matt said, operator, representative, whatever it takes, get me out of here. That we'll get to a point where we won't know if it's a bot and we will not care. And we've seen, in fact, Google's done we've seen some examples of this where you call, make a reservation at a restaurant. And it sounds like a human bot that answered the phone, and you speak to it like a human bot. Can I get a table for two at 3 o'clock or 7 o'clock on Wednesday? And it says, sure, that works. We have it. And you hang up. You don't think, was that a bot? I don't, do I care if it was a bot? I think we're going to get to that point where we won't even really care. And so that introduces a whole new set of questions. Should we care? Should we know whether it was a bot? And this is a whole nother subset of questions. But to answer your point, I think we're going to move rapidly from the highly predictable use cases to a little more nuanced type of use cases in the very near future.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, it is such an interesting time, and I completely agree. I think that right now we're at an interesting point where customers, like you said, Dave, they kind of do care. They do care whether or not they're talking to a person or a self-service mechanism. But if we educate customers and we really show them the value of what they're getting out of a self-service interaction that's going to solve their problem a lot quicker, it's going to be a lot more seamless for them, and they're going to get just as good of a resolution in this self-service channel as they are with a human, I think we will see greater adoption. And then we could, again, of course, like you said, get to a point where we're able to solve more complex problems. But I think right now in this moment, just kind of getting through that hurdle of navigating that digital and human balance and making it more comfortable and palatable for customers, that's kind of the stage that we're at right now. So continuing with that, we have, although, of course, we know this technology is so exciting and we're at this period of major transition and change, we still see a lot of challenges and it's not easy. And so, what are some of the top challenges that you're seeing with businesses when it comes to implementing and really finding value in AI agent and automation right now?
Oh, that's easy. You just turn to your staff and find the person with the most vast experience in implementing AI automation. Oh, you don't have that. Oh, okay. Well, then it's a little harder actually. So the basic problem that I'm trying to illustrate here is that we're doing things that people don't have experience in. Now, some of the vendors, some of the CCaaS vendors, like UJET, are getting some pretty good experience in it, but most of the enterprises don't have a lot of experience in this. And so just understanding how and where to start is a little bit of that's a big impediment. I mean, what's possible? What can we do? And you don't have the staff to rely on, or I should say, that you don't have the experience in your staff. So it's generally going to take a little bit of working closely with your CCaaS provider, understanding what's options, and understanding your data. I see a lot of demos that are a bit ridiculous sometimes. I saw this one demo that they figured out the number one reason why people call, and it has some pretty basic answers. And so they said they would implement that. And the way they did it was they implemented, they loaded a manual. They had written a manual to address all these questions. And then one of the questions was, I'm outside of that. Can I get exceptions? Can I get permissions? And that was causing trouble. So they said, oh, that's simple. Now we just load this other manual that has exceptions to the rules. I was like, wait a minute, who has a manual with all the exceptions? Nobody has this stuff. And if you did have a manual of exceptions, why wasn't that in the first manual? And so there's a lot of this trying to get the data right, and organizations are finding that they don't have it well documented. They just kind of know what to do, and that intuition is hard to pass on to an AI until you document it. So I think the main thing is to really work closely with your providers, understanding your calls and understanding your data gaps, and your data opportunities. And where you have the data that can guide an AI, that's where you're going to want to start. And where if you don't have that, then the place you start is to create that data. What are the rules? What are the processes? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, we see this all the time where over the last 20, 30 years, contact centers booming as an industry and becoming the top of mind priority with leaders around the globe. What's happened is people have basically like bolted on technology to their existing contact center stack. And in some cases, this has worked, but the challenge is when you want to layer AI over top of the house you've built, and you already have this very shaky, siloed, fragmented foundation, you're going to run into challenges really quickly. So, well, I think there's this natural gravitation when people think of implementing AI for customer experience use cases. Self-service is usually the first thing that they think of because it's the front end of your business in most organizations. I think there's this over rotation almost towards trying to solve the AI agent problem before you kind of can use AI to step back, understand the truth of what's going on in your organization, what's working, what's not, bringing the data together to Dave's point, and then building AI agents and self-service automation flows on top of that, such that you're addressing the challenge, the breakages, and what's already there before you're basically accelerating and amplifying those challenges, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a challenge that we're seeing on our end too. I think from our own research, we found like it might be 23% of organizations said that they actually feel ready, prepared, and they have their data in place for an AI implementation, and that's less than a quarter. So many people are really struggling with that. So certainly great insight there. Uh, I want to talk a little bit about another challenge, which is the idea of personalization in self-service, something that a lot of organizations struggle to actually achieve. So, can you talk a little bit more about why they've struggled to achieve personalization in self-service in the past and how these emerging tools like AI agents and AI play, what role they play in really improving self-service and driving that high quality automated experience that customers are looking for?
Yeah, I think this dovetails right into that last question really well in terms of like this broken foundation. So I think you've seen the contact center providers, whether it's CCaaS or standalone AI agent technology or CRM vendors, like everybody has for the last 20 years tried to be the system of record. And the challenge is when you have three systems of record, you have no system of record. And without that kind of unified view of the customer, whether that's a data lake or a CDP platform or just getting all the data back into the CRM, which is an approach that UJET's always taken. Without kind of addressing that breakages, personalization is going to be an inherent problem. So I think as this evolves and customers are looking more towards implementing AI solutions and personalization being top of mind, you really need a solution that can orchestrate across all of those platforms, and integration is more important than ever. Like this idea that best of breed will win is really not the reality that we live in. There's this best of need, I think, is the better way to think of it. And so making sure that you have a platform that can help you break down those silos, unify the data, will really drive those more personalized conversations going forward.
I think personalization has always been the goal, and that can freak out some people, right? Nobody wants to get the call or the letter that says, "I know what you did last summer," right? So we have to figure out how to personalize in a constructive, useful way. And in the context center, it's typically something about where the customer is in their journey. And where and that journey could either be, of the day, like they're trying to get support. They've already gone through certain hoops. They've already rebooted the system. They've already been authenticated, whatever. So we don't have to keep on repeating and requesting or asking the same questions or making them go through the same hoops. But it could also be a longer sense journey that, you've called, you're interested in this brand new red car that we've had in the showroom for a while. And this is like, the third week that you've that you've expressed interest. Maybe we don't have to treat you like the same thing. Have you considered a red car? So we want to kind of personalize it in a logical way, in a sense that the customer doesn't have to repeat themselves, and in a way that is actually helpful. Um, and I think that is really the goal of the personalization, particularly with handoffs, particularly when you say, okay, I can't help you any further, this person can. And there's nothing anybody hates more than having to, reboot and start all over again with the conversation. So capturing that context and capturing that history, that's a form of personalization that really becomes useful.
Yeah, I can't help but think of this pretty awful experience I had with a banking provider the other day where I was trying to do a large kind of lump sum money transfer, buying new windows on the house. And so I authenticate on my phone to get unlock my phone. I authenticate to the mobile app to get into my banking app. I authenticate to the chatbot once I'm in the app. I get a live human, authenticate with them again. So that we're at 4 authentications just to have a chat with a human. And then they tell me that what I'm trying to do, I can't do over chat, and I need to call in. So you can imagine, I call back in, I authenticate again to the interactive voice experience. I get a live human. They ask me my mother's maiden name again. By the time this conversation was resolved, I authenticated about 6 times across several channels. So I think to Dave's point, as you know, when you were talking about personalization, really addressing that level of conversation complexity, like technology exists to solve this, whether it's authenticating off of your phone through the mobile application, whether it's storing that context so the next time you call in, you know why I'm calling. Um, we we can do so much better with tools that exist today, and companies that we trust continue to drop the ball, unfortunately.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think it, when we talk about personalization on our side, a lot of times people assume it's about having this really deep conversation or just feeling like, a connection with the brand. And some of the times, like the best personalization is something you don't even notice that's happening because it just makes your life easier and it makes that process so much more seamless. And so you're talking about that bad experience that you had, but when you have a good one, sometimes it's not even that noticeable. It's just that good. So yeah, I think it's so important, especially as we manage this dynamic between the technology and the human, being able to really pass that context on to make it a seamless experience is so critical. So, moving on to our third top priority, based on our CMP research, for CX executives. The other piece of the equation here is improving customer analytics and insights. So, what trends are you seeing in your customer discussions right now, and what role is AI playing in here?
Brooke,
Yeah,
we should have started here, Brooke. This is my favorite topic. This is now we're getting into the good stuff. So when we have conversations about AI in the contact center, we always start with automation. We always start with uh, the human versus the robotic experience. But this is where the rubber hits the road, right? These AI insights are actually changing the contact center dramatically and in really positive ways. Now, for the longest time, the contact center has been really stupid. And what I mean by that is it's been engineered and optimized to do one thing, which was the real-time conversation. It started off with voice, and then it moved into different channels, but it's the conversation. And the data was like in a CRM or somewhere else. And the pecking order was clear because the agent had to think about what the call was about and then go document it in the CRM after the conversation. And so pecking order was that way. And in that transaction, in that workflow, we lost a lot of information and we lost a lot of time. And one of the biggest changes in the contact center today with generative AI in the past, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years, is that now the contact center itself as a division, as a function, understands and documents the conversations. And this is huge. And so generative AI can listen in on a conversation completely passively. No one's talking to the bots, and it understands, what the conversation is about, what the agent is saying, what the customer is saying. They can understand the mood of people, whether they're angry or excited, and all this information is now being captured and stored. This is the important part, stored in the contact center. So the contact center is not dumb anymore. It's not putting all of its valuable information in some other system. It's actually becoming a store of information and really valuable information. What you're talking to your customers about. Holy cow, that's a little valuable. And it's real data, because in the CRM model I gave earlier, where you're putting it in, you're forcing things into some arbitrary menu, and you're forcing things into these ridiculous things that may not even be accurate. We've all been forced to do this at one thing or another, and the menus just don't quite fit. With the generative AI, you actually ask the contact center, what are people talking about today? Why are they calling today? And it's not some arbitrary menu that it's choosing from. It's telling you, hey, the number one reason people are calling today is because there was a fire in Chicago that's impacted a whole bunch of our customers. It's like, oh, that wasn't in the menu. So we're getting much more useful, valuable information. And it's real time, and it's completely changing the whole pecking order thing I mentioned. All of a sudden, the contact center is becoming the most valuable source of data, because it's where the customer conversation is occurring. Matt, top that one.
Yeah, that'll be tough to top. I think for me, it's also on the to come back to an earlier point, a little around the automation side of things. So not just, Dave, you talked about automating quality management and scorecarding, which historically been like a very laborious kind of time consuming thing where a supervisor may be responsible for 10 or 20 agents. You can't listen to 10 or 20 conversations simultaneously. And now we have AI automating this. I think you're also seeing on the kind of flip side of the conversation, if you think of where conversations end, historically, like the companies that we're working with are sending us surveys, right? At the end of a call, at the end of a chat, at the end of an email. And that CSAT voice of the customer data is reliant on you as a consumer actually responding to the survey and clicking things and providing that amount of data, where now leveraging generative and LLM, like all of this can be automated. Customer sentiment can be automated. CSAT scoring can be automated, and actually like pulling out the heart of the matter, if you will, is so easy. And I can't say it enough. Customers tend to want to start with generative agents at the front end of the conversation. This is quick win stuff. This is stuff that doesn't take months to deploy. Like leveraging AI analytics should be the technology that absolutely everybody starts their journey with AI using. I don't think I topped
Definitely.
you, Dave. I don't think I topped you, but it was different talking points.
Both
Talking
valuable
points.
answers. I appreciate both. Uh, Matt, you actually talked a little bit about generative AI just there. That was another one of our top priorities for CX executives this year. Can you talk a little bit more about the role you see generative AI playing in contact centers and CX?
Yeah, this is a one I'm kind of passionate about because I think it's where we've really come over the last couple of years as generatives become more accessible and easy. Bot building's been easier, etc. This is unfortunately where we're also hearing horror stories because, if you don't ground that AI agent in your customer data, in your business data, you're going to get really wacky experiences and things go awry really quickly. So there's, for people that aren't very close with AI, there's actually a couple different types of AI. AI in the contact center has been around for the last 7 or 8 years, started as very intent-based or what's known as deterministic AI, which is very predictable, controllable, like no chance of hallucinations, very grounded in the programming. But it requires a little more effort to actually stand up because somebody have to think through what's all the different reasons a customer could call us and how do we want to respond for each of these customer intents. Generative on the other side, super fast, super easy to build. Some of the conversational AI building tools now are as easy as prompting Gemini or OpenAI, as everybody's becoming more familiar with how to prompt and get the best out of kind of agent experiences. So you kind of have these two flavors of AI, and what's happened is people started trying to solve intent-based AI challenges with generative. And for example, if I need to check my account balance, there's no reason that for me to go have an LLM do that question and answer. It's very predetermined, very predictable. So I think, while Gen AI is the top of my priority, my feedback to anyone who's starting an AI journey is do not forget the importance of intent-based deterministic AI, because there will always be use cases where you want that kind of rigid, strict control around the questions you're asking and the responses you're getting. Um, so yeah, don't lose sight. That would be my number one piece of feedback there.
I think one thing you didn't touch on there, Matt, is the expanding scope of the contact center. And, a lot of the vendors have slowly, casually changed their description. They used to be called CCaaS providers. They were very proud of themselves for being CCaaS providers. Now they're kind of calling themselves CX providers, as a customer experience. And what they're doing with that is they're signaling a shift in their focus. And it's a little aspirational, to be honest, but I think that's good. That's not bad. It's good to have aspiration. But the idea here is that contact centers are largely associated with customer service. And where customer experience is a little broader. It's more around the entire customer journey, which includes pre-sales, it includes support, it includes uh, campaign management, a number of other activities. And so the CCaaS solution, or the contact center solution, I should say, is becoming a little broader in what they can and should be used for and what they're positioning for. And it's actually pretty interesting. And this involves, certainly inbound inquiries like we're used to in customer service. It also includes outbound, it includes multi-channel, it includes major campaigns and tracking the effectiveness of these campaigns. And so what we're seeing becoming much more important in the contact center is how well it integrates with all these other systems. And because this organization, the customer journey touches lots of different departments in an organization, and they all have little databases and systems. And so how the contact center can update and refresh and understand where the customer is in those journeys. And so there's just a lot of going on here. So I think there's a pretty big emphasis around this view of CX and the integrations that are necessary to accomplish this.
Yeah, I remember Dave talking to you about this when I can't remember pre-pandemic when everybody started latching on to using the word CX, and you were very, very fired up about the fact that like, no, like the experience starts when I search on Google, which means that ads play a role and sponsored, placement, Google responses plays a role, and then the experience on your website, navigating it, like, which is there's all these pieces of CX that contact center vendors aren't thinking about. Yes, the use cases have broadened, and you may have like patient care reps in a healthcare scenario using contact center tools to do their jobs now. You may have the sales reps. We're actually seeing a lot of traditional support reps doing more cross-sell, upsell activity now, thanks to things like AI in the contact center. But there is still, these kind of superfluous parts of the customer journey that are outside of the layer that a traditional CCaaS would touch. So huge opportunity here going forward, I think, for us on the vendor side of things. As well as like even from like a people process perspective within an organization, when you think about customer care, you're kind of seeing the role of like a CXO or a chief customer officer now. I think it really highlights how rapidly like both the tech is growing, but the use cases are growing. The customer personas, the user personas are all evolving as a result of this as well.
Yeah, I mean, thank you all for sharing. I completely agree. I think, like you both said, it's really a holistic journey, and we need to think outside of, just the contact center and those traditional areas. So far, we've talked a lot about the role that AI plays in automation and analytics. But I wanted to pivot here and talk a little bit more about the human-led customer interactions. So, CMP's recent research shared that the number one driver of customer satisfaction in live interactions is speed. So, what can businesses do in 2025 and beyond to improve speed in human-led interactions to really help drive better customer experiences?
It's interesting. When you talk about speed, you immediately want to go to things like self-serve and automation. But I'm going to say that some of the best forms of AI, and actually some of the best forms of technology in general, are the invisible ones, the ones you don't really even notice. A good one, for example, is the improvements that companies have been making in audio quality. You notice a noisy line and background noise. You don't notice, it just kind of disappears when all the noise goes away. So these are great improvements. So one of the big improvements with AI in the contact center is actually it has different names, agent assist. I prefer the name augmented agent. It's when AI isn't actually involved in the conversation necessarily, the customer doesn't actually know that AI is involved in the conversation, but is helping the human agent with the information they need to answer questions. So just a real simple one. I like to know the operating hours of your branch on Main Street. And so the AI heard that, knows that the customer is asking about operating hours, knows about the location, and pops up on the agent screen operating hours at Main Street right there. And the agent said, "Oh, glad you asked. The closes at 5." And they've got that information intuitively, naturally, and perfectly timed. And we're seeing this use case of augmented agent becoming very, very useful, shortening the amount of time on the call, shortening the amount of time it takes to train an agent, improving customer satisfaction because the agent has the right answer very quickly. Just a whole bunch of things. And to your point about speed, making everything go by much faster. And so it simplifies and accelerates almost everything about the process without even actively being involved, at least from a customer perspective. So one of the terms you hear a lot of the contact center companies use is turning their agents into super agents, because what that is supposed to represent is they now know everything. It's just really easy use case. And everyone who knows AI knows sometimes that AI gets it wrong. And an experienced agent will know that's the wrong answer. I know what the customer asked, and that was the wrong answer, so I'm not going to give it to the customer. And so that's what another term for this is human in the loop. But it works out really nicely that the agent is up to speed, gets trained faster, and the calls go faster, and there's no wrong information.
Yeah, bang on, Dave. I think, just pulling that thread a little more, like not just thinking about knowledge assist and like the suggestions, but actually like thanks again to generative and LLMs, you're now seeing this evolution to more like next best action coaching. So it's actually the agent assist or co-pilot, if you will, is actually stepping the human through the actual process. So if it identifies that customer wants to cancel, sure, I can show you the instructions on how to cancel, but I actually want you to run this cross-sell upsell play, right? Hey, we have this bundled offer, we want you're a loyal customer, we want to keep you happy, what can we do? Also leveraging generative AI on the agent desktop to do things like real-time transcription. Now the quality of transcription now relative to 10 years ago has gone just absolutely skyrocketed and through the roof. So also helping drive that average handle times down. We've seen customers with up to 30% improvement kind of on average in terms of leveraging these assistive tools on the desktop and really improving those operational processes.
Yeah, a really exciting time and so many efficiency gains to be had and truly really just supports the agent, takes a lot of that work off of their plate so they can better connect with customers and do it quicker, get answers quicker, which is really exciting for both customers and employees to really feel like they don't have to put in as much work to really deliver the best experience. Because I know that, they are dealing with so much. So it's just one thing that we can take off their plate. So we've spent a little bit of time talking about AI in the contact center best practices and things to watch out for, but that leaves us a few questions about what's next in CX in 2026 and beyond, which is always exciting to look ahead. So, Dave, why don't you give us some thoughts on, where you see AI agents evolving in 2026 and really what the role of agentic AI will be in the future?
Well, I love predicting the future. It's actually one of my favorite pastimes. Very few people actually ask me my success rate at my predictions, and so I'm glad you didn't. But I will highlight the fact that anyone who tells you the future of contact center is probably a liar. And the reason I say that is because we have never seen this many moving parts. We know that AI is changing every single aspect of the contact center. And I'm not kidding, every single aspect. Nothing is being untouched by AI right now in the contact center. We know that the investment of AI technology is unprecedented. I mean, we've never seen investments like this. We know that some of the smartest people in tech are completely re-examining the technology, and we know some of the smartest people in customer service and contact center are re-questioning every aspect of their solution set. Everything is a moving part right now. And so that makes it a lot harder to get these predictions right. So I will politely say that I will not offer you a prediction of the future and instead tell you that any prediction you get is wrong. Um, but I will say that we're going to see a lot more automation. We're going to see a lot more self-service. We're going to see more channels, not less. More channels. We got RCS kind of just coming out of the gates right now. More channels coming out. And I also, certainly we already touched on it here, more personalized services. We're going to see more personalized capabilities, but better uses of leveraging the data that we have. And then one thing we haven't touched on very much is, and we've been talking about this for years, but it's going to start happening, is more proactive services. And we're just starting to see the beginning of that. When a flight gets canceled, I heard somebody got a flight got canceled and they rebooked them on a new flight and they were upset because that wasn't going to work for them. And it's like, okay, it's great. You can change it, but at least you've got at least you've got something to work with. And that was something we didn't do before. It used to just be you had to stand up at the airport in a line of 100 people trying to get rebooked. And so at least you got something that might have worked. And so we'll get that more personalized, and they'll start. Oh, we know you can't travel those days. Whatever. So it's going to get better. And so those are my. That's the way I'm going to answer your question. Just a little more of this and that, not so much this is going to happen.
Yeah, I think, Dave, when you were talking about the rise in automation, one of the things that on the tech side we're obviously all thinking about right now, as people are thinking about agentic and what agentic actually means, because this is like CX all over again, in my opinion, or omni-channel. And it was like, no, you don't just get to rebrand your multi-channel as omni-channel. You got to actually make it omni-channel, right? You don't get to rename your CCaaS product CX. You actually need to do more across the customer journey. And now we're kind of seeing similar where it's like agentic's the buzzword in the market and everybody's trying to figure out what it means. I think agentic's ultimately going to mean a lot from the like orchestration and automation layer downstream, where AI agents are actually understanding and reasoning and making decisions and impacting, decisions and taking action on back office tools and systems. Your flight example is a great example of that, Dave. And I will say, shout out to my airline provider last week who did get me rebooked, and they refunded me for the seat I had paid extra for at last minute. And all of that was done without me ever having to talk to them. And it was the perfect flight home. But I think we're also going to start seeing this rise of agent to agent. What happens in this future where, as a consumer, I'm on my phone using an AI agent, and that AI agent is talking to your company on my behalf. So that's a huge piece. I think also, Dave, building off what you said, like the not just the proactive piece, but the implications of mobile on that proactive piece, right? And how we can actually, uh, both from a technology side and the people process side, more intelligently engage with customers who have this like power of the internet personal computer running in their phone. I think we've seen use cases with like banking, for example, and starting to see more with healthcare. But I think across any of the lines of business and the companies that are serving this, you're going to see more and more of that in the future, which again, it's a different experience. It's a different buyer perception on, how they want to be serviced. Yes, they want speed. Yes, they want personalization. Yes, they want first call resolution. But their threshold for pain, depending on that entry point, will absolutely change. So yeah, those would be the ones top of mind for me.
I know we can't predict the future, but those were some pretty good insights to get us going. So one more prediction question for you, Matt. As we look ahead, thinking about where the human fits into all of this, can you talk a little bit more about where you think CCaaS and CX technology goes next with the human agent?
Yeah, I think as things become more automated going forward, you're going to see more rise for human in the loop. So if you think about a situation where, generative AI and self-service is getting so good now that maybe it could do a retention and it could, cross-sell me on a promotion. What happens in this example where maybe I've seen a better price with another vendor? How does this handoff between like an AI agent and a supervisor with the authority to actually say, yeah, give this promo or price match this in the back office? So the role of humans is going to definitely continue to change. We're already seeing it with the need for more empathetic conversations, but I think you'll see a lot more of this interplay between what traditionally was a standalone, isolated self-service interaction that may be interjected with humans at certain points and then pivot back to self-service and automation on the back end.
I'll just add that I think expectations continuously change. We mentioned earlier, you get that bot, IVR, whatever, and you operator, operator, operator. I think that is going to change. I think before the pandemic, there was a movie called Up in the Air, and they had the ridiculous notion of this concept of firing people over a video call. And it was meant to be outrageous and meant to be crazy. Then, of course, the pandemic came, and that's what we started doing and started doing it regularly. And expectations changed. And if you think about it, if you hate your boss anyway, maybe you would rather deal with a bot. So my point is that expectations change, and the kinds of things that we would not want from an AI in today might be very different tomorrow. I know sometimes I put on my headphones in a Uber or a taxi. Not so much that I really want to listen to my headphones, but I just don't want to listen to the driver. So I know that there's reasons and why people might prefer a bot. And so I think right now we're kind of delicately being polite, but I think expectations will change.
Great point, Dave.
Last question for you both before we wrap up. Historically, we've always thought about AI as really focused on three main user personas for contact center use cases: AI agents for customer self-service, AI assistants for human empowerment, and then AI insights for analytics and continual improvement. So, my last question for the day here is, what use cases and personas do you think AI will start solving for next when we look ahead?
I'll jump into this one because I talked about augmented agent and how the AI helps the agent. Another version of that is to flip it around and augmented customer. And I mentioned earlier that we're looking at more and more self-service capabilities, and the mental shift of letting customers having more capability that wasn't there before. Um, and so the way you solve that is you give the customers more self-service capabilities and you give them some assistance. And I've actually experienced this already where I've had to fill out a complicated form on a website and the AI followed me through and was telling me that, oh no, that's not the information they're looking for in this field. Now you need to put this in. And it was just kind of prompting me all along. And it was nice. It was actually nice to have somebody over my shoulder to help me with this kind of a complex form of questions I had to fill out. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that. I don't like the idea of the AI shopper assistant that keeps on the endless. Would you like fries with that? You know, it's like, did you think of this? You think of that? Maybe you want to buy this. That's just annoying upsell, and it drives you crazy. But these ones that are really trying to help you navigate a website, you get to a big, large company or a big, large government branch, and you're trying to find some information, and so right now you either have to search on your own or they might have a search, which is kind of useless. But the idea of being able to interact with a expert AI bot that helps you navigate the website and help you get to the right page, as opposed to answer your question incorrectly, but leads you to the right answer, I think that's going to be a very interesting and growing category.
I think that's a great point, Dave. For me, it's kind of the flip side of the coin. So how can we as technology providers actually start leveraging AI to help contact center administrators, operational teams, etc., more efficiently build? So I talked about leveraging AI insights as the starting point for your journey with customer experience and AI earlier on. You can almost imagine this world in the future, and you're starting to see it with some of the vendors where AI is actually understanding your configuration. AI is understanding what's broken. AI is building and proposing the types of self-service agents you need based on your historical conversational data. And then the AI stays in that loop and it's continuously improving. So you may see, rather than a scenario where today you basically look at a AI analytics and go, oh, we're not solving for problem X. We need to feed this some knowledge data, like Dave said, with the exception documentation. AI might actually go try to find that exception documentation and pull it in and maybe put a human in the loop and say, hey, we've noticed your customers have been calling about X and we found this document that can solve it. Do you want to actually push this change into production? So that kind of like learning, building, analyzing, and continually improving on the back end, on the admin side, is a huge, huge next step for the industry as a whole.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. It is so important to have these conversations, especially as we wrap up 2025 and look ahead to really understand what we should be thinking about. And you both certainly give us so many insights and things to really focus on as we look ahead. So thank you both, Matt and Dave, so much for joining us here at CCW.
Yeah, pleasure. Enjoyed the conversation with you both.
Thank you.